All right, welcome back, Team ET. Great to have you here for yet another week. And we're just talking with our guest about how quickly this week is going. It's just phenomenal. You probably heard me say in the intro that we're almost at the halfway mark in the year. It's just incredible how quickly it's gone. So hopefully all of you are on target with your goals and with whatever it is that you're trying to achieve for this year. If not, time to do a reset, I would suggest. So today is a really interesting topic, and I probably say that all the time, but it is. It's about healthcare. It's about healthcare within the corporation, and it's about how technology is now starting to play a role within that healthcare scene and some of the dynamics that are playing out as a result. And our guest, Bethany Corbin, welcome to the ET Project, Bethany, first. And we'll say hello and then we'll get into some questions. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here for this discussion.
Great. You will have heard me say in the intro about Bethany being an attorney, not my favorite profession. So sorry, Bethany.
It's nobody's favorite profession. We do not get a lot of love.
But you have a really interesting dynamic, or an intersection, as you call it, between law, healthcare, and technology. And I think it's a perfect setup for the direction that the world is heading at the moment, to be honest. I mean, we all hear so much hype. Well, it's probably not hype, it's probably reality, but it feels like hype around this healthcare space and the challenges that we're facing within healthcare, spurred on, of course, by the pandemic, which has probably been great from a media perspective and not so great from a health perspective, but not necessarily the reason only behind why everything seems to be moving faster. I believe it's been on this trajectory for some time now, where we see healthcare really starting to ramp up and make some significant inroads towards many areas of the medical profession. So I want to bring you into the conversation in a moment, but just to frame it, when we first spoke, right, a few weeks ago, I was talking about a book that I was reading called Life Force. It was written by Tony Robbins, or released back in 2022, I think, by Tony Robbins, Peter Diamandis, and Robert Harari. And really fascinating book. And when we got to meet, it was so aligned and so much in parallel. And you focus on so many of the things that they talk about in that book. So I'm really excited to see how we can massage this conversation in that direction. So I love to start with all the guests talking a little bit about your backstory, a bit of history about what brought you to the career that you're in. So maybe you could start there.
Absolutely. I'm happy to. And, my career actually started very differently than where I'm at now. I was one of those attorneys that everybody probably hated because I was in the litigation in the financial services field when I first started out. And so we were doing things like helping the big banks foreclose on mortgages. And it was something that I just absolutely hated because I didn't feel like I was able to make a difference. It can be difficult to feel like you can make a difference with such a big corporation. And so I really got to thinking, where is my passion? What do I want to do? Because clearly it is not this. And is this all it means to be an attorney and to be one of those perpetually hated fields? And so the more that I thought about it, I realized that I had a really deep connection with healthcare because my mom has been involved in the healthcare system since I was a small child. And she had one of those illnesses that really took 7 years to diagnose. So we went through all the different permutations of the healthcare system, right? All the gaslighting that can occur, really having no access to digital health tools and having to physically go to all of these different hospitals across the world, Mayo Clinic, all of that without the digital technology and the convenience that we have today. So I thought about that and thought that, healthcare seemed really interesting. I wonder what that would look like for a healthcare lawyer. I ended up doing a healthcare LLM, went into a big law firm at Washington, D.C., where I worked in healthcare for a while. And then I ended up actually going to be a professor of law at Wake Forest University. And it was there that I was doing some just general health law research for my scholarship. And I came across this term Femtech. And for those who aren't familiar, because it is a very recently coined term in 2016, Femtech referred to female health technology, right? So technological solutions that were really focused on helping women's healthcare. And I thought that was really interesting. I did some more research in it, and I realized that nobody in the legal field was talking about it. And that was around, 2018, 2019.
Mhm.
After that, I had my own very unexpected women's health issue that was diagnosed at just a regular physical exam. And so that really thrust me into having to do my own research to see what treatment options were out there for this illness. And I learned that the treatment options were so few, they were still very invasive, yet this was a condition that, up to 80% of women could have. And
Wow.
that really transformed my career trajectory because I thought, I want to help startups. I really want to help that digital health startup field, especially those who are looking to bring and revolutionize women's healthcare products to the market and really help drive innovation. So I've now started my own firm called Fem Innovation that really helps to support digital health founders and those in the women's health community.
Great story. And hopefully the health issue is under control or resolved.
Yeah, it's under control for right now. So fingers crossed.
Okay.
But we need more innovation for the women who come behind me.
Yeah, well, like I said, with that book that I was reading, it certainly provides a lot of promise about what lies ahead, and I'm extremely hopeful. Uh, I know you within the tech area of health, you do some work around wearables, and I was going to talk about that later, but I'm just thinking now, um, is there a particular style that you're focused on with the wearable technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we work with companies that do all types of wearables. Obviously, the ones that people are most familiar with, right, are going to be those fitness trackers or the health trackers like the
Hmm.
Fitbit, the Apple Watch, those types of things coming onto the market, Bella Beat for women. There's other types, though, of, quote unquote wearables that we see. Those can be things like necklaces, right, that have sensor trackers in them. They can be,
Hmm.
more like bracelets or rings. Aura is one that's really come onto the
Yeah,
market, having some women's health partnerships, cardiac monitors, those types of things. And then we also see very frequently, right, things like the apps where you're inputting user data. That's not necessarily a wearable, but it is more of the direct to consumer products similar to a wearable that's out there. Really see a lot of proliferation in apps right now.
yeah.
There's also, when we think about wearables, things that are coming onto the market that are being used more for remote patient monitoring, right? Like the blood pressure cuffs. And there's some new sleep technology actually that can kind of monitor your sleep cycles and see if you potentially have, sleep apnea or things like that that are coming onto the market as well. So I kind of put those into the kind of, medical device wearable category just because they technically go on your body.
Yeah, it's probably the best category you could find for them anyway. Let's start with a really broad question, and then we'll zoom in a little bit. But if I look back, you can tell by my black hair that I'm so young. But if I look back over my career and look at the journey with health and healthcare, and it appears that as a global society, we're making progress in the right direction when it comes to healthcare. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I absolutely think that's a fair statement. I think a lot of that has been driven by the COVID pandemic, but as you
Mm.
mentioned earlier, right, some of those building blocks were getting in place. It was just accelerated.
Right. So that being the case, and of course that's a generalized statement, right? So there will be countries that are more advanced than other countries, but
Yeah.
as a generalization, we seem to be living longer, gradually, progressively, aging longer to a later age. Um, Therefore, we can imagine that healthcare is improving.
Yeah.
I'm looking at corporations, though, and I'm wondering, has that general global trend transpired across industries that drive the economy. So is the healthcare transferring inside corporations, the improved?
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic question. I think we've definitely seen on a global perspective innovations and enhancements in the types of healthcare that we're seeing across corporations and their emphasis on healthcare within the workplace. I think that's something that's really been driven in the last 2 to 3 years, where we've seen a focus on employee well-being and more corporations really starting to offer different digital solutions to their employee base. You know, things like subscriptions to Headspace, right, or Calm, or other type of meditation apps. That we've seen some employers really take a focus on employee mental health, and by doing so, adding to their benefits package, you know, virtual online therapy sessions.
Right.
So things like that we've really started to see. It doesn't necessarily mean, right, that we have created an environment, right, where individuals feel comfortable talking about their health conditions within the workplace yet. It doesn't mean that we still don't have significant barriers whenever we think about corporations and the healthcare they're providing. A lot of healthcare still is dominated and determined by the type of corporation that you work for. And that can, you know, depending on the type of job that you have, right, and the income that you're making, can result in health disparities at, you know, a lot of different levels. So we're getting there. We're definitely making progress in the right direction, especially with the digital health tools that are being offered. But there's still quite a bit of ways to go there.
Yeah. If we wound the clock back a decade, what sort of progress have we seen in this last 10 years for corporations? Has it been significant, or is it just that continuum that you would expect to see anyway?
Yeah, so we have seen significant progress when we think about corporations and the digital health landscape just in general.
Right.
A lot of the solutions, right, that corporations had employed before, right, were going to be kind of your standard healthcare packages, right, where you see your primary care physician, right, you have a health plan that reimburses you. That type of thing was pretty standard. Now, with the proliferation of digital health technology, especially in the last 3 years with the COVID pandemic, we're seeing more and more of those corporations really flocking to those digital health solutions, not just for employees, but because they can actually be revenue saving for the employers and the corporations themselves. There's been, you know, there's studies, right, that show that if you enhance access to digital health care, then you're going to end up saving money as a corporation, because the burden of illnesses across the globe for the workforce can be billions and billions of dollars. So if you're enhancing access, you're enhancing the ability for individuals to get, whether it's physical or mental health conditions, treated, and you're therefore improving the productivity of your workforce. And so that's something that we've really started to see happen over the last couple of years. I find that very encouraging.
Right.
And I also, you know, so that kind of gives it a return on investment per se for the employers, in order to provide those solutions to the employees.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing I would think that we're seeing globally too is just over the, you know, 2019, 2020, 2021, we saw a massive amount of new digital health solutions come to the market. And a lot of these corporations, as part of their health plan, they're incorporating those different products. And it might be things that we haven't seen before, like fertility apps and fertility treatments coming on for women's healthcare. You know, we talked a bit briefly about mental health solutions. It could be things, you know, that are more focused on preventive care, because you have that ability at a relatively low cost to provide access to those solutions. When we look kind of at 2021 in general, we saw there was significant funding for the digital health industry. And there was more than about, you know, $30 billion in deals being done across the globe. So we had a lot of companies getting $100 million plus funding rounds. And that has also really driven innovation for corporations, because they are looking to partner with corporations, with employers. That's one of their key, you know, consumer bases that they want to partner with.
Right. So that sounds very promising. I was thinking, if I'm a CEO sitting in a startup at the moment, it could all seem a little bit overwhelming. Like, where do I start? So maybe we could look at a couple of scenarios, if you don't mind, and just, I won't play devil's advocate, but I'm happy to see that we're making the progress, but I'm also curious, is it really everywhere? And I can imagine it's not. But so if we're a startup, what sort of advice would you offer to the board of the startup to help them understand where do they look, what is the awareness they need to have, and how do they stay current with everything that's happening?
Yeah, fantastic question. And you're absolutely right. The kind of proliferation of digital tools, right? Their adoption by employers, it's not happening across the industries, right, across the globe at the same levels. Obviously, those corporations that hire more people, right, they're well-known ones, Amazon, et cetera, they're going to have, much higher benefit packages, right, much broader and robust benefit packages than somebody who is per se a startup company. So if you are a startup, what do you think about? What do you do? The first thing to know, right, is kind of the relevant laws about what you are required to do as an employer or a corporation that's starting up. Some laws may not apply until you have a certain number of employees, and then they might require a certain minimum number of benefits, or healthcare offerings, that type of thing. So just making sure that you're acquainted with the legal framework and the regulatory framework. And then also really thinking about, who are your employees? Are they all men? Are there women interspersed? What is their age demographic? Where are they located? Do they have access easily to healthcare in person versus needing these digital health solutions? And I think that that's something, that a lot of employers don't necessarily take into consideration at the very early stages of company formation. It can be very easy to say, you know what, we're going to pick the cheapest solution that we can right now because we're obviously in startup funding mode. We need money. And that's something that we can afford, to be a little cheaper on. But if you really think about what your employees need in terms of their healthcare conditions, where they're located, do they have that access? That can help you determine which health solutions you should be offering them, because it's not just going to be a one size fits all across all corporations. So if you are, for instance, more heavily female dominated employee base, what that might mean is that you're going to think about things like adding in fertility solutions or having maternal health leave, those types of things where if you're predominantly, a male employee base, you're not thinking, maybe those aren't solutions that you need to be investing in right now. And the other thing to think about too is, how can digital health solutions help to save you money, right? So we've seen a transition, definitely in the US, but starting in other parts of the world as well, to more of a kind of virtual first or virtual only healthcare system, which can relieve burden on, providers, et cetera, because we do already have provider shortages across the globe. And that can, really spur and enhance the adoption of digital technologies, where you're only going to actually physically see a provider if there's a reason to, but you can get quality care through that digital technology. The other thing to think about is, are you in a demographic or a jurisdiction that has the broadband capabilities or the digital infrastructure to support the digital health solutions? Because if not, that's not going to be something that you necessarily want to offer to your employees or invest in. So really understanding your employee base, where they're located and what they need, that's not only going to help you choose the most cost-efficient solutions for that base, but it'll also enhance your employee satisfaction, because they're going to be thinking, yeah, you understand me, right? I'm not going to need to look for another job elsewhere to get these critical healthcare services that I need because you've invested in me.
There's so many questions just came to my mind listening to your answer there, but one area that I was thinking about is from a legal ramification perspective. We can all identify, I guess, the minimum requirements. In some countries, I believe there's even legal ramifications now for corporations that they have to take accountable and responsibility measures to ensure that they're taking mental health, etc., into consideration. how would I find that out? So where would I go to understand that? Do I go to the labor law section? Is there a specific healthcare section I have to look at, or what?
Yeah, so you go to your least favorite person, the attorney, right now.
Ooh.
If you're a corporation, right, that really maybe you're kind of, on the borderline between what you think you might need some more guidance on this,
Yeah,
absolutely recommend consulting an attorney who is familiar with, employment and labor laws,
yeah,
and just health insurance in general, but really they can help you understand kind of those labor laws and what's going to apply for the benefits.
yeah.
But there's a lot of information that you can obtain yourself without going to the least favorite attorney. And the way that you can do that, right, is Google. Uh, you can really Google or otherwise search on the internet and say, healthcare laws or healthcare insurance requirements for startup company in XYZ jurisdiction. And that will start to filter the results down for you. And when you're looking at those results, the best thing is really to look at those reputable sources. So look for things that might be put out by your government agencies,
Right.
because that's going to have the latest and most up-to-date information for you. Oftentimes it's going to be, an agency that's related to employment, labor laws, or health insurance. Those are going to be kind of the three agencies to really look for in whatever jurisdiction you're in. If you have an HR person in your corporation, right, they should be pretty familiar with the benefits that are needed to be offered there. And then make sure too, depending on, what jurisdiction you're in, for example, right, the United States, we not only have a huge federal legal system, but we also have individual state legal systems. And so the requirements for things that you have to do from a healthcare perspective for employees can differ state by state. And that can be a bit challenging whenever you think about, oh, I have employees that are located in 10 different states, even though my company might be located in New York. My employees are remote, right? They're in California and Illinois and Texas. Understanding that labyrinth of laws, that's when I would pull in somebody who is experienced in that legal field and really ask them and make sure. So that really comes into play more with the remote corporations or corporations that are so large, right? They're operating in multiple jurisdictions, and same principle applies if you're a corporation, like let's say you're a corporation located in India, but you're working with employees who might be located in Europe or the United States, really understanding those cross-jurisdictional requirements. That I would recommend legal advice for. If you're just, a startup company, you're really looking to see what's the minimum that I have to do, right? I don't want to be out of compliance. I want to be in compliance. Really look at those kind of government organizations in your jurisdiction.
And as a general rule, or is there a general rule of thumb that says you should be monitoring this every 3 months, every 6 months for legislative change? Is there any guidance like that?
Yeah, so the thing about legislation is it moves slowly, which is both a positive and a negative.
Yes.
And so usually, people are updating or looking for new updates about once a year,
Mhm.
just as kind of a general rule of thumb, or whenever they get notified. Usually you'll find it, in mainstream news. I always set up alerts for news that comes out on a specific topic. You can set up those alerts and just get notified to make sure you're keeping abreast of when new legislation might go into effect.
Right.
But it moves pretty slowly. And in the US, for example, we have a lengthy administrative law process. So there might be instances where a proposed rule comes down and okay, it's not final yet, but maybe I as a corporation want to be notified about that and understand that because I have a chance to submit comments and
Mm.
get my voice heard if there's something in that proposed law that I don't like or that I don't think is going to work for my corporation. So I like to be notified just kind of things that are on the horizon,
Mm.
not only because I can comment, right? I can kind of get an early sense of what that might look like, but also because I can start planning. If I know that we're going to see a shift now in requirements and I am nowhere near ready, I can at least start to build the foundation that I need rather than waiting for the law to get passed and say, ooh, I got to put that entire infrastructure in place in 60 days. So I recommend kind of the email notifications and really kind of doing a more in-depth search, at least once a year. I have some companies that I work with who, just kind of have a lawyer on retainer.
Mm.
And if there's any updates in the law, right, they say, lawyer, that's your responsibility. You notify me. And so they can kind of outsource that as well.
Yeah, great advice. You mentioned also about age demographics a little bit earlier. And I just want to circle back to that. Is there a real distinction between expectations between the different um, age brackets when it comes to healthcare provisions or expectations?
There is, and we've really started to see this with the Gen Z population, to be honest. There's much more of a push for healthcare services that they think they're entitled to, per se. And so they have different, mental health needs, right, than somebody who might be a baby boomer and the elderly population. And so there are different healthcare services that need to be provided depending on the age of the workforce. What we're seeing now kind of across the globe is that the workforce is increasing in age, and that means that we need to now pivot to solutions like longevity care or more chronic care conditions, and providing resources and health assistance for that, because our population is aging. At the same time, we have, Gen Z, and I don't know what the one after Gen Z is called, but they're coming onto the workforce, sometimes with a bit more self-entitlement, to the provisions that they want. There's been research that shows they think they're entitled to things like promotions faster. They've also grown up in a world that has social media and that technology. So they're much more adept at kind of these digital health solutions. And I think much more receptive to using those digital health solutions as a first line in healthcare. Whereas, per se, right, the aging population didn't grow up right with Facebook or her Snapchat or Instagram. And so, it can be a bit more difficult for them to use or want to trust those digital health solutions as a first line of defense. So I think that's something that can be a bit tricky, especially as your workforce is growing, but you have different age groups and different needs within those age groups. It's definitely something that, larger corporations need to be thinking about to give the employee workforce the right solutions.
Yeah, great. I'm curious about, I mean, your area of expertise should be able to answer this, I'm hoping, but I'm curious, what's the potential exposure for a company who embraces a new digital health technology that somehow doesn't work or provides inaccurate information or guidance or even direction? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we protect against them?
Yeah, phenomenal question. And I think it's one that is very relevant today, because depending on right where you're located and the laws surrounding the digital health technology and kind of what they have to prove in terms of safety or accuracy, we have a wide range of devices on the market today that vary substantially in accuracy and safety and usability. For instance, we had Cerebral in the US, which was a digital mental health startup, and they boomed to unicorn status, right? Meaning over $1 billion valuation so quickly. They were, connecting with patients, very, very popular mental health solution. Come to find out, right, they've got 3 separate federal government investigations going on right now. Their prescribing practices are coming under fire because they weren't really taking into account patients' prior histories. They were over prescribing medications, right? Things like that. And now we have a problem. So, and that's not unique to the United States, right? That's not unique to Cerebral, not picking on them. But those are the inherent risks that we have in all of these digital health solutions. And as an employer in a corporation, how do you know, right? How do you know that this particular app or digital solution that you want to use for your employee base has been vetted, right? That it's accurate, that it's going to safeguard patient data, because that's another huge issue across the globe.
Yeah.
That can be very hard, especially because we live in a world where the algorithmic predictions and the different algorithms and coding for the devices are considered proprietary. So you can't really get in and see, oh yeah, what, that one's using some inaccurate data to make these algorithmic predictions. That's not going to be good for my employee base. Kind of the recommendations that I have are, do research before you add a digital health solution to your health plan as a corporation. study it, vet it, see what clinicians are saying about it. There's oftentimes a big gap between clinicians and tech founders, and a lot of people don't understand, right, that a lot of these digital health devices have come on the market without any backing or medical literature or support from the scientific and medical communities. So make sure that you are choosing an app or a solution that has that backing, right? It's got a medical board, or it has, some really deep, substantial involvement by a clinician. In addition to that, I would say, really make sure that you're looking at their privacy policies or their privacy practices, because that's where a lot of apps are getting into trouble right now. A lot of digital solutions are selling data downstream that can kind of make patients and your employee base feel like they've had a violation of their trust. See what other corporations out there are using, how that has worked for them in the past, if they've had any issues. Ultimately, right, the responsibility for the accuracy of the device, right, and the data that's being held by that device resides with that device's, founding team, that company. But it can, even though you might not be legally liable, let's say, as a corporation, if one of your solutions doesn't pan out, it can still impact employee trust and you as an employer. For the solutions that you've selected for your employee base. So doing that upfront research, see if you can find medical literature supporting, at least the underlying basis or calculations that the app is making, and really, really kind of vet and compare. What we're starting to see too, is, think tanks and organizations doing some of that work for us, thankfully. So there have been surveys, Surfshark, for instance, has done quite a few where they're comparing, the top 20 apps in XYZ field, or which apps are most data hungry. So take a look at those. I anticipate we're going to see some increased surveys and studies like that in the future too.
Yeah, great advice. That leads on to another question that I was thinking through was, I can imagine with the speed of change and the rapid development in technology within the healthcare industry, there must be a bottleneck somewhere in getting that technology to market. Now, based on what you just said, that's possibly a good thing, because it means longer to vet and to really ensure that what's being released is of the right quality. But on the other side, if you're somebody who is suffering with chronic or whatever form of illness, and you know that there's a technology or a health product, medicine coming, the frustration must be incredible with any regulation delay. So I'm just wondering, how much of an issue do you see that being with the regulations?
Yeah, there are absolutely bottlenecks. And as you mentioned, a lot of that happens at the regulatory level because of, the restrictions and the requirements that a lot of governments have put into place to bring these new products to market. Now, obviously, that's going to depend, right, which jurisdiction you're in, how heavy-handed are those regulations. But for instance, in the US, what we see is, things like your wearables or your apps, those slide through pretty quickly because they have a level of enforcement discretion, because they're not going to be, something that's implanted into your body, right? Or anything that's being used to provide kind of life-saving medical care. So they're quote unquote low risk. And so they're able to kind of slide by without significant regulatory oversight. Now, the downside to that, right, is that we get devices that have been proven inaccurate. We have huge inaccuracy problems. They're not really helping women or, consumers who are using these products. And there's no way for consumers to really tell or vet that. On the other end, though, and this is particularly true when we think about those devices that we do actually have a substantial need for, right? Something that's not just, oh yeah, I'm inputting my data, right? Or I'm accessing educational information. These could be things like life-saving drugs, medical devices that could really help improve your life, your well-being. Those typically get bottlenecked because they have to show that they're safe or they're effective or they're going to work as they're intended. And because of that, right, bringing that product to life, you have that huge research and development phase, which I'll come back to. But once you've got that product, you've got to test it. You've got to test it, multiple different, ways, times, people, animals, all of that to prove that it's safe and effective. That can take years. And that's kind of, a slowdown, not only in terms of time, but in money. because it costs a lot of money to go through that regulatory approval process. And if you're a company who wants to offer that product in multiple jurisdictions across the world, okay, that's great. You just got it approved in the US. But what's the approval, the approval process in China or India to get those products to life there? Oh, it's different. Okay, now I got to go, and do this separate approval process. So regulatory, hurdles can absolutely be a bottleneck. Money can be a bottleneck. And then even before that, there's got to be a business case for bringing that product to life. And that, I think, is where we don't see innovation in places it should be. Women's health is one great example, because what is the business case for women's health research and women's health innovation? That's something that, a lot of companies don't understand yet. And so they're not willing to put the upfront research and development money into bringing those products to life. And that's even before you get to the regulatory hurdles in that pathway. So I think showing a return on investment, showing that it's worthwhile putting, millions of dollars into bringing this product to life, that's kind of the first hurdle. Then you have the regulatory pathways as the second hurdle. Then you have kind of the expansion and scalability as that third hurdle.
It's such a huge topic, fascinating topic. I read somewhere on your site that you're about to release a new legal platform. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes, we're actually launching in June. It'll be the Fem Innovation platform, and it's really designed, kind of with four prongs. Right. The first is, having that legal and business consulting for those startup companies who do want to enter this space and revolutionize digital health. The second is, we haven't talked a lot about this, right, but kind of political advocacy and thought leadership, and pushing, to kind of change the regulatory landscape so that maybe we could get some products through faster, as an example. Third is kind of bridging that tech clinician gap I was talking about, and getting more clinicians in medical research involved with the tech founders so that physicians can actually use the data that comes out of these, digital solutions that are proliferating across the world. And then the fourth is just kind of general public education, because healthcare isn't something we necessarily talk openly about, especially when we think about women's healthcare. That has really been relegated to the private spaces for so long. And so we're trying to change that by doing advocacy and educational campaigns.
When does that become available?
It starts on June 1st, so very close, very excited for it.
And how do people find out about it, or where do they find it?
Yeah, so they can go to www.feminnovation.com. That's kind of where our platform will live. And then there'll be information there about, getting more involved, whether you're a founder, whether you're just somebody who's interested in digital health or women's health. We'll have a community that you can join and really get access to, educational materials, webinars, coaching sessions, that type of thing as well. We also offer a quote unquote Femtech or digital health school, both for companies interested in women's health and then companies that are just digital health in general. How do you build your products legally? How do you scale them? What does it look like if you want to enter the US market, from India or from Europe? So we walk you through all of that. I myself am very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on linkedin.com/in/Bethany Corbin. And then, like a savvy tech grandma, I am also getting into Instagram very slowly, very, very painfully. But you can find me at Femtech Lawyer.
Fantastic. You're nowhere near as much a grandma as I am a grandpa. So
Given that I grew up with these social medias, you'd think I'd be a little bit better, but getting there.
Very good. Well, I mean, that's fantastic, and I look forward to seeing the release of that. And I'm sure I will find my way to that site and have a look around and probably send you some questions. But
I love it.
I hope it's extremely successful. And I always like to ask our guests to share a parting wisdom in relation to your area of expertise. So is there anything you would say to our listener base, executive talents, leaders by another name, in this field? Like, what should we be thinking about right at the moment?
Yeah, one of the things that I would absolutely say is we have to keep innovating, and we have to keep being open to the new solutions that come on the market, regardless of the past and painful experiences that we've had with other digital health technologies, because we're constantly evolving. And so what the market looks like today, even though certain digital health fields may look saturated, they're only saturated at the level because we haven't thought harder about how to innovate better in those areas. And so I fully believe that there are better technological solutions out there that we haven't thought of yet, and being open to including those in your platform and taking a broad look at what your employees need, especially at the different stages of their lives, that's going to be crucial to making sure that you stay competitive in the long term with employee retention. So I'm really excited for where the future of digital health goes from here. There's been a lot of kind of doom and gloom talk, right? We're seeing a downturn in digital health funding right now. But I think the more that we as consumers and as corporations continue to demand innovative solutions, the more our voices will be heard, and we will actually see higher levels of innovation than we're seeing right now.
Right, right. Bethany Corbin, you are a walking encyclopedia when it comes to the area of health in general, but the legal aspects of it, as well as the digital technology. And it's a really interesting conversation. Fantastic to connect with you. And I'm sure our listener base will have got a lot from our conversation. So please, if you're listening to this and you have any inquiries, please reach out to Bethany, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to address any of your questions. So yeah, we'll link to all your sites and platforms and everything in our show notes. So if you're looking for the links, please go to the show notes and you'll find them. But Bethany, thank you for being on the ET project. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.